Omniverse. Hey, this is Kat.
And Jess.
You know, Mother, She Wrote is free to listen to, but it's not free to make.
So please, consider supporting our work on Patreon.
You'll get early ad-free episodes of this show and all the storytelling podcasts we create.
Head to patreon.com/Omniverse Media to chip in and join our community of world-saving wonderkind.
Oh, and heads up, this episode contains discussions about some sensitive topics, including ableism, abuse, death, the loss of a parent, violent conflict, emotional trauma, slightly saucy language, and mention of a pandemic.
Please use your best judgment when listening and take care of yourself.
Love you! Dear Mom, I'm coming home to see you soon. And I'm bringing a new friend. That girl who lost her hat, I was right about that feeling I had. More than I knew.
Oh, Ninten. Are you an epistolist too?
I mean, my family only goes to church on holidays. I think we're Methodist?
No, an epistolist.
Oh.
It's an easy mistake. Apostles, epistles, epistler, Episcopalian. An epistolist is someone who writes letters. I have pen pals too.
I just write letters to my mom.
Me too. I'll leave you to it.
She's different. Like Lloyd and I. Snowman is a really tiny town, and even in the spring, it's really cold. We had to hike through some wilderness before we got there. Fun fact, Bigfoots exist, and they can control ice with their minds. Like other people and wildlife, they're not really mean, just more victims of whatever's messing with people's brains. Lloyd and I were freezing and pretty banged up when we got to town. We put Dad's spending money to use and got some warm clothes. It was handy having scarves to pull up over our faces because people were sick with the flu here too, and we had to ask around to figure out who the hat belonged to. As it turned out, this Anna wasn't too hard to track down. She's the pastor's daughter. The church was outside of town, and Lloyd and I were dead tired, so we got a room at the inn. But as we laid down, distant organ music drifted through the clear, cold air, like it was calling to us. Lloyd, are you asleep?
Signs point to no.
Do you think we should... Do you think we should maybe go to the church?
Once more into the breach.
It was so cold and tough going, but the moon was bright, and it wasn't long before we saw the glow of the church's stained glass windows lit from within. Hello? Hello?
Ninten? Lloyd?
I see our reputation precedes us.
This blonde girl wearing a nightgown stood up from the organ, and the next thing I knew, she was hugging us like old friends.
Oh, you're here. Thank God you're finally here.
Hi.
Oh,
We,
you brought my hats. Everything happens for a reason. Gosh, I'm not even dressed, and you've got to meet Papa. But I'm all packed and ready to go.
I'm sorry. Packed?
Don't get silly on me now.
Ninten?
Oh, you're the transmitter. I'm the receiver. Duh, Anna. I'm sorry. It's just I've spent so much time with you, it's like I know you already.
Whoa. Hold on.
Anna, do we have visitors?
Papa, come meet the boys from my dreams.
What?
Excuse me?
Anna had seen us in her dreams every night, through all our adventures. She knew everything.
I can't wait to see Magicant with my own eyes. Oh, you both look so cold. Papa, could you make us some cocoa? Lloyd likes his with extra marshmallows.
An accurate supposition.
She has powers like I do, but she doesn't just read minds. She has visions. She knew we'd find our way to her and that we need each other to save the Earth, but also to save her mom. She was abducted, just like Great-Grandpa George and Great-Grandma Maria, just like a lot of people. Anna's mom was in Youngtown when she was taken, and the rumor is the entire town has disappeared.
Anna, you've been my strength since your mother.
It's going to be okay, Papa. I promise. When I come back, Mama will be with me. God granted me these powers. He sent Ninten and Lloyd here. We're going to save Mama, and we're going to save the world. Believe in us.
I do. Join us in prayer, boys.
Well, I don't...
Just hold my hand.
Youngtown is on the other side of the Holy Lowly Mountains, across the Yucca Desert. And last we saw, the Paradise Line's bridge over the canyon to the desert has been destroyed. But Youngtown isn't the only place where people vanished. Spookane, the next town over from Snowman, no one was sure what happened there. So we decided to check it out. Folks had been calling it a ghost town. We didn't realize how literally we should have taken that.
Dear Mama, back home, there aren't many people who'd call me brave and mean it. I startle easily. Things get too intense, and I'm huddled up, counting backwards, reciting verses, trying not to lose control. When you were taken, I did my best. People called me brave, but it's just a word to say that they were surprised I hadn't fallen to pieces. I stepped into some of your routines. I helped Papa. I don't think I'd have been able to keep my head up without my visions. Seeing Ninten, Lloyd, and I together, I didn't feel powerless. I knew they'd find me, and I know we'll find you. God shows me what I need to see to keep going, and I'm thankful for it. I don't know if that's brave. I think being brave must be the confidence to stare down something scary and know who you are in the face of it. If you'd have asked me before today, I would have said, of course I know who I am, but the truth is more complicated, isn't it? I've been holding back something inside me for as long as I can remember, and so I've always been scared. Today, I started learning to be brave, because today, my world changed. Today, I learned something about me. The streets of Spookane were empty. A whole city, abandoned in chaos. There were signs of panic everywhere, but no people. Nature was already taking back the land. Bears and bobcats roamed the neighborhoods, and like back home, a malignancy buzzed in their minds. Then I saw the saucers, hovering in weird formations in the sky, moving suddenly in impossible patterns and directions. It was a nightmare, this empty town. It was like they'd already won. When we saw a neon sign lit on a hotel at the edge of town, We were drawn to it, like moths.
Hello?
Hello.
Oh, good. Someone's here. Wow. It's a relief to finally find somebody. What happened?
What happened? Would you like to spend the night?
No. We're okay.
They turned around and something looked wrong about them.
Are you okay? Is anyone else here?
Bedbugs. Ha 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 ha.
Ninten,
Bedbugs.
Ninten, their mind.
Okay.
There's nothing.
Hello.
I pushed Ninten and Lloyd to the ground. A beam shot over our heads. When we looked back, the unblinking illusion of a human being was gone.
Bedbugs.
Is that one of the
Yeah. A starman. Like at the zoo.
Franklin badges at the ready?
Good save, Anna. Stay behind us, okay?
Hovering up from behind the counter, fingerless hands on its hips, was a white-skinned automaton. Lloyd and Ninten rushed into action, and I froze.
Hey!
What happened?
Hey, you! Take your dang hands off him! Ah, you broke my plasma beam! Okay, you!
Lloyd! I froze, and I could feel something in me. Like a sneeze, a tension, a word stuck in my throat. Painful to choke back, but clenched off on reflex. I could feel something in my fingers, like magnets, drawing me to a point. It ached. Lloyd's nose was bloody and Ninten's face was going purple. His eyes met mine. Then that thing looked at me, and I let go.
Anna, are you okay?
The Sasquatch's cryokinesis was nowhere near this devastating.
Anna?
Ninten, I'm sorry. I froze.
Yeah, you did. You froze him good. Can you teach me how to do that?
When I came to, I saw its body hanging limply against the far wall, pinned there by large icicles. Black fluid leaked down the ice from the punctures in its skin.
You were amazing. You were all like, whoosh. How come you didn't say you had ice powers?
I didn't know.
Do you have any other special abilities we should know about?
I don't know. But I did know. Deep down, somewhere. Speak evil of no one, avoid quarreling, be gentle, show perfect courtesy toward all people. Grandma's needlepoint of Apostle Paul's words. You and Papa would point to it, I'd recite it. You warned me about getting too angry, but that's not it. Me having visions and talking to animals is all well and good. Those were safe, but I'd done other things, hadn't I? You and Papa were afraid of what I could do. I thought you were afraid of me. I was afraid of me too. I'd forgotten why. Did I hurt you, Mama? I'm sorry if I hurt you. I wasn't there to save you, but maybe I could have been. I didn't know. I built a levee in me to hold all this back. A levee so high, I couldn't see the other half of the sky. Now that it's broken, I'm starting to make out the whole horizon.
By the time we made it to the wilderness east of town, we'd given up hope of finding any humans alive in Spookane. But that's where we found them, in the hills. A bunch of the townspeople had abandoned the city and took shelter in cabins in rich folks' vacation homes. They said the trouble started months back around Halloween. A crowd of kids all fainted at the same time while rehearsing for a pageant at the All Hallows Eve festival. No one knows why. They said in the weeks that followed, a madness spread through the town. Now the people that remain just live out here. It seems like they're doing okay. We couldn't help but notice that there was an enormous mansion up on a hillside. It's as big as a hotel. It could house so many people, but it was vacant, and no one would go near it. It turns out it's the old Rosemary Mansion. I heard about it on Unresolved Mysteries. They say it's the most haunted place in Eagleland, and inside there's a haunted piano that plays itself. Well, it's all true. And just like back home, the spirits are restless.
It's not that I don't believe you, Ninten. There just has to be another explanation.
Oh, come on. You've seen aliens and a magical world in the clouds, but you draw the line at ghosts and zombies?
What do ghosts and zombies have to do with extraterrestrial intervention?
Beats me, but it's not a coincidence.
Maybe it has to do with psychokinetic energy?
How so?
Well, imagine the planet is an attic, covered in dust. The dust collects over time, and it doesn't really do anything. It's inert, just like the residual psychic energy that people leave behind when they die.
Residual psychic... Do they teach you that in church?
No, they talk about heaven and hell. But what Ninten's talking about doesn't sound like it has anything to do with either. Haven't you ever seen Ghostbusters?
No.
Wow. I think you'd like it.
You really would. But anyway, you've got this dusty attic, and then the aliens show up, and they're like a big psychokinetic fan. They want to control people's minds, or whatever it is they're doing. So they turn on their fan, and while they're blowing their psychic influence around, they can't help but stir up all of this dust. All of the dormant psychokinetic energy is kicked up everywhere, and the next thing you know...
Your lamp attacks you.
It's not an unreasonable theory.
Inside the mansion, the electricity was out and the furniture was covered in plastic. It was like a crypt. A really fancy crypt.
Why does anyone have a suit of armor in their home? Let alone 2 suits of armor.
They do appear to be authentic. This would be a great place to hide.
What are we looking for?
Stairs to the basement, and then, an even deeper basement. Maybe a secret basement?
What's a piano doing in a secret basement?
Well, legend has it that one of the Rosemarys was born freakishly deformed. The family was so ashamed that when they built this house, they put in a massive basement to keep her hidden away, even from the rest of her family.
That's horrible.
It's worse. She lived her entire life underground, never seeing the sunlight. That might be why she died young, just a kid our age. The only thing that brought her happiness was playing a piano in the deepest, darkest depths of the basement. And ever since her death, she's kept playing.
So this house was haunted before everything happened?
Yep.
Allegedly.
Great. I get that we're looking for fragments of a song, but so far they've come from a bird, a monkey, a music box, and a doll. What makes you think a haunted piano is part of it?
It just, seems suspicious.
That's it?
Hey, you get visions. I get feelings about things. This fireplace is big enough somebody could live in it.
Somebody does live in it.
Oh!
What is it?
Hello, Mr. Mouse.
Hey.
I will never get used to you two talking to animals.
So you want to hear the piano play?
Yes, please.
Do you know the way?
Well, see, I think the best place to hear it is from your grave.
It's very rude.
Ghost!
Your mother eats trees in hell! Get 'em! Get 'em while they're alive and kicking!
They came from everywhere, Mom. Screaming translucent shapes. Poltergeists throwing stuff around until they took shape into exploding piles of garbage. And worst of all, the suits of armor.
They're not stopping!
There was no going back the way we came. We ran deeper and deeper into the house and further down hallways and staircases. We were bleeding and bruised.
In here!
We were tired. But ghosts don't tire.
There's no method of egress!
Lloyd, do you have any bombs?
No, I used them all!
Oh,
2 times 2
well
is
then,
4
it's just us and Sir
Times
Rust
3
Bucket here.
is 6.
But we're not stuck in here with
2
you.
times 4
You're stuck in here with us. Right, Anna?
times 5 is 10. 2 times 6 is 12. I'd chalked up Ninten's bravery to experience, but that's not it. He was scared too. It's the way he feels things, his intuition, his belief. He believed in himself, that somehow he'd keep fighting, that somehow he'd make it. In that moment, I saw that he believed in me. He believed in us, and I could believe in me too.
Right, Anna?
Right. You stay away from my friends. I let that little light of mine shine, Mama, and it melted the darkness away. Just like Ninten said, in the deepest, darkest depths of the mansion, we heard it. A piano playing by itself.
There it is.
Is that the melody?
I don't think so. Ugh, darn it.
Did we scare it away?
I don't think you can scare a ghost.
Maybe we should be ready for another attack.
The playing was so lonely. I could hear her voice in the notes. This poor girl, locked away alone in here, even after her body had gone. She was still trying to reach out. So I sat at the keys and said hello.
Anna, what are you doing?
Ninten, the keys! Did you see that?
Oh my gosh.
At first, the keys were just moving on their own, but then in the glow of Lloyd's flashlight, I could see her, the faintest outline of the girl who had been, slowly glittering to the surface. She was smiling.
Wait, that's it. That's the melody.
Her eyes shone at me, and I smiled back. I could feel her ascending. The room trembled and released. The weight of all the pain that had held her here fell away, and at last she was free. We emerged from that miserable mansion, weary and wounded, but laughing, holding each other in the full moonlight.
Paranormal apparitions.
I can't believe that. That was so crazy.
3 friends,
The best friends I've ever had.
each of us stronger than we ever knew.
But together, there's no obstacle we can't face.
No leap we can't take.
Because we have each other. I'll see you soon, Mom.
We'll find you soon, Mama.
Love, Ninten.
Love, Anna.
Welcome to Mother, She Wrote, a travelogue diary through the strangest, most thought-provoking, most heart-rending video games ever made. Mother, as it's called in Japan, and EarthBound, as it's called everywhere else. This is the story of the first game in that series, EarthBound Beginnings. I'm your creepy chronicler of cursed chateaus, your maleficent mistress of mesmerizing mother minutia, your deeply haunted host, Cat Blackard. And I'm joined by my gregarious game gallivanting ghoul friend,
Jessica Mudd, and I feel like I must have fallen asleep at an Ed Wood double feature because the Sleepy Hollow of Spookane, situated between snowman and reindeer, is a literal nightmare before Christmas. Mars attacks the dark shadows of this planet of the apes, so we have big fish to fry. We better head to this home for peculiar children and get some help, because we're gonna need it faster than you can say Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice.
Come on now, we don't need that Dumbo showing up. Holy filmographies, Batman, what were you thinking?
Sorry, I don't want to be a burden to anyone.
Well, if you're looking for a sinister circus aesthetic, this is not the game for you. I mean, Tim Burton's career was just getting started when Mother debuted, and his movies don't really have anything to do with the game, so...
Look, I started playing with Spookane being next to reindeer and snowman as a nightmare before Christmas, and it just went from there.
I know how it is. You get those big eyes, and you start seeing a wonderland of possibilities.
Exactly. Now you're getting it.
Well, I better quit before I'm a corpse bride. Strap in, Frankenweenies. Let's read the Mother's Day Times.
Let me just be the first to say, wowza, and hello to all our new friends. Between this episode and the last, the 2023 Mother Direct happened, and it was dazzling. There are so many cool projects and games. If you haven't seen it, you absolutely must check it out. Just go to mother.direct. But we know a lot of you have seen it already because, gosh, there's been a lot of new listeners.
So, hi.
Hi, we're really glad you're here.
Really, really glad. Thanks for hanging out with us. In this Mother's Day Times, we've got a lot to cover. We're going to hear from some listeners and share some announcements you need to know. But first, some housekeeping.
Housekeeping?
Exciting housekeeping.
I'll allow it.
For all you listeners in Foggyland, we're coming to the UK. Jess and I are attending London Podcast Fest on their Audio Drama Spotlight Day, Sunday, September 10th.
Come hang out with us and see live performances of some of our favorite audio dramas and actual plays like Realms of Peril and Glory and We Fix Space Junk.
If you're in or around London, maybe we can stage a mother meetup at that event or some other place and time that weekend. But that's not all. If we've got any listeners in the north, I'll be in Glasgow for most of September. If you live in either of those locales and want to say hey, drop us a line at dearmothersherewrote@gmail.com or on our Discord. Now, in this episode, you may have noticed our audio drama segment was big, like full length. Well, that was a bit of a surprise for us too. I loved writing all the characters together.
And then she turned in an enormous script, which was great, so we just went with it.
Our powers combined, and we turned this podcast up to 11. And this has become our mid-season special. And also, it heralds a mid-season break. Kind of.
We can't put this genie back in the bottle. If you liked this more intense audio drama format, that's basically what the rest of the season sounds like. But expanding our production means we need some more time to work on the second half of the season.
So we're taking a page out of the Mother Encyclopedia and stepping into a dimensional slip. You see, occasionally the encyclopedia interrupts its journey through the games with articles called dimensional slips. They're all written by different people from a wide range of backgrounds discussing specific aspects of the story or world of Mother. And now we're doing the same thing in podcast form.
In our first installment, we're talking with Rhea Werner, who you just heard as the voice of Anna. Sarah is a writer best known for their all-ages sci-fi audio drama Girl in Space. Kat and I talk with them about the parallels between their childhood and Anna's, and A Wrinkle in Time, a 1960s young adult novel about psychic children that laid the foundation for everything that came after it, including Mother.
Look for that episode the week after next. Same Mother time, same Mother channel. Now, Jess, we've got some letters.
Oh, we sure do. Some awesome folks wrote to us at dearmothershewrote@gmail.com, like Hillyjix, who said, I PK love this show. Tanda Gasa, Kat and Jess, I heard about your podcast from Mother Direct, and I was smashed away. I binged through the entire catalog in just a few days, and am eagerly awaiting for the next episode.
Like, oh my gosh, that is just so cool.
Super cool. The research and production quality are so good. Even as a big EarthBound fan myself, you two are teaching me new things.
Thank you, Hillyjix. That's everything that I could hope for and more. We've also got a letter from Ryan who says, I'm a massive Mother fan. I even wrote a paper about the series and Starman.net for a college class at one point. I love how seriously you take the series as a work of art. EarthBound Beginnings is a tough game, but I really love it and feel like it's often overlooked in favor of its younger siblings. I had one little thing I wanted to mention. Spookane should be pronounced more like the Washington city, Spookane. I could be wrong, but that's how I read it as a Pacific Northwest native.
Oops. We already recorded this episode before your letter came in, Ryan.
You do raise a valid point. I'm from basically the opposite side of the continent, so yeah. Spookane. You're going to hear it the other way throughout the episode. Oops.
I eagerly await controversy about how to say the first town name in EarthBound.
I don't know, maybe we could do a poll when the time comes, you know?
That's a great idea. That way it's not on us if we say it wrong.
Because there's no wrong. It'll be their decision.
That's true. Pronunciation through democracy. That's the way to go.
Yeah. Consensus.
One last letter. Will H. said, I've been a fan of the Mother series for as long as I've had internet access. They shared how YouTubers Chugga Conroy and Stephen Plays got them into the games and made them aware of Starman.net. And they go on to say, your podcast really puts me in the character's shoes. Thank you for giving me a new perspective of my favorite game series.
Thanks, Will. And thanks to Nolan and Diggy, who also wrote in. We're so glad this show is hitting the mark. I mean, like, it came to me in a dream and then we made it. That's kind of a risky play. But hey, speaking of Starman.net, shout out to Vid, who posted Mother She Wrote to the Starman.net front page. My heart skipped a beat seeing us up on the site I used to haunt as a teenager. We mentioned that site's history and my history with it back in episode 0. And we also mentioned a forthcoming feature film called EarthBound USA, which tells the story of that site and the Mother fandom in America. At the time, it didn't have a release date, but it does now.
Yeah, the show-stopping surprise finale of Mother Direct was the launch of the EarthBound USA trailer and the announcement of its long-awaited release date, November 27th, 2023. It looks incredible, and you should really see it for yourself. Head to earthboundusa.com to watch the trailer and sign up for updates.
Oh, and before we wrap this segment, there's one more thing. Just a little side note. We're getting married! This has been the Mother's Day Times. We'll see you next time! We're in Snowman.
The Winter Wonderland. A very small little town. So small that it doesn't even seem to have a hospital or a real hotel. It has just a little bed and breakfast, as far as I can tell, that's just called Jack.
Yeah, and that confused me for ages. But in the Mother Encyclopedia, it specifically calls them Jack shops. This is not the only one you're going to see. And it's like a kind of small chain of stores in the more rural towns in the game.
Oh, I thought maybe it was like Jack Frost or something since we were in like a wintry setting.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. I have no data on what that culturally could mean, why it's Jack, what any of that has to do with anything. But yeah, that's what's going on.
There is no hospital, right? This is like a small town.
Yes.
Okay.
No hospital.
Yeah. So, and everyone there, of course, has a cold again. And if you catch it, they do sell mouthwash there.
But they're charging premium prices.
They do charge a lot of money for it. But you know what? I was a captive audience because I still have not returned that old man's dentures yet.
Oh, well.
I got to get on it.
Someday.
No.
Someday you will be rich with mouthwash.
You know what? I want to support small business. So, I'm happy to pay for the overpriced mouthwash.
So the Jack Shops is not just the inn, it's also the actual chain of like general store. What they sell is kind of weird. It's bread, mouthwash, Life Up cream, and a frying pan.
It's like your old country trading post.
Now the inn, I know a little something about it. Just a little side note. It's run by a middle-aged widow who lost her husband during the war. Don't know which one. The major industries of Snowman are forestry and agriculture. No surprise there. The encyclopedia says there's a legend about why it snows so much in this town. It used to be this was a region that never got much snow, but when a girl made a wish to Santa Claus saying, "I want to wake up to a white Christmas," it was granted.
And it never stopped snowing.
In order to get to Snowman, you do have to hike a bit from the train station to the town through the woods. And if you're not ready for it, you're going to be beset upon by some pretty vicious wildlife.
So some of the enemies that are in this area include the silver wolf and the polar bear.
Yeah, they're just palette swaps to the other wolves and bears that we've seen so far, but they're different and harder. You'll also see Bigfoot, as they call him in the encyclopedia, America's abominable snowman. Interestingly, as you heard in the letters from Ninten, they use PK Freeze, and they use actually a bunch of different PK Freeze. The psychokinetic abilities come in a variety of different levels, from like alpha to beta to gamma and so forth, and Bigfoots use a bunch of them. They don't ever hit you with their hands. They just use psychic abilities, which is an interesting feature of them.
Yeah, so are the aliens unlocking these abilities in the wildlife and people that they are influencing, or is this something they've always had?
We don't see psychokinetic abilities in other Earth creatures. I think the game is actually telling us something about Bigfoot. They might not have the same kind of civilizations that we have, but they are advanced in other ways that we are not.
Oh, okay.
And that's not important. It's just an enemy in the game, but it's an interesting bit of flavor to this world.
For sure. I fortunately only encountered Bigfoot once, and I was able to get past him, so no problem there.
Not as bad as the polar bears. Polar bears are trouble.
They hit like a truck. They have a lot of health and a lot of defense.
Jess, you mentioned that Snowman has a lot of folks with the flu. There's an indication in the encyclopedia that a new species of cold virus spread throughout Snowman. So it seems likely that it came from here. And it spread because the people of Snowman have a habit of traveling. Because of them living like all these cold winters and stuff, they tend to leave town. That's reflected in a lot of the dialogue. And for all that interesting information, the Bigfoot is my smashable enemy of this chapter.
Good choice. It caught me so off guard when I was hiking to Snowman and then suddenly got attacked by Bigfoot. I don't know why it caught me off guard. It shouldn't have, knowing this game. But it was just like, oh, okay, yeah, Bigfoot. All right, that makes sense. Oh my gosh, he's using psychic kinetic powers on me. Ouch!
It is jarring. Snowman is a small town, but it's also home to my memorable melody because it has such a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful song that plays in that entire area. A song that is used again in EarthBound and via all of this exposure has become in the video game music scene, or VGM, one of the like kind of Christmas or Yuletide classics of this era of game music. Like if you're looking at compilations of different wintry, Christmassy game music, you're almost always going to see Snowman on there. It's rendered as best it could be in this game, but the production of it gets even better the next time you hear it.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's, I think, one of the few tracks on the soundtrack that is in 3/4 time. So it has this sort of like swaying beat to it. It's like almost kind of a waltz, and
Yeah, a
it's very
wintry
just sort
waltz.
of light and airy and jolly, but it's not harrowing.
It's also a bit haunting in some ways, but in like a kind of beautiful way, the way that winter itself is haunting.
Yeah, exactly. I love that track too. And it would have been my memorable melody, except that we didn't have a whole lot of new music this time around, and I figured you would probably be picking that one, so I chose a different one.
Okay, well, I'm excited to hear what it was.
Some of the interesting quotes from the people in Snowman. One person said, "Please say hello to the camel's bones in Yucca Desert. I knew that camel once upon a time." What? Say hello to the bones? What is he talking about?
It's just gonna be important at some
Okay.
point.
Go talk to the bones. All right. Well, we've already been to the Yucca Desert once, and I suppose now we have a good reason to go back.
This part of the game starts seeding the knowledge of other places. Like, for example, Youngtown. At the train station at Snowman, there's a girl and her father there, and she says that her mom left for Youngtown, and they haven't heard from her in days, and that she and her dad are going to look for her, but they can't do that because the bridge is out crossing the desert. You also hear that everybody in Youngtown has disappeared. Like, that's the rumor, and that's where Anna wants to go.
But we can't go there yet. We got other
Yeah.
things to take care of first.
We're hearing about a ghost house in Spookane. We're hearing about this Yucca Desert really for the first time because the game doesn't really encourage you to go there. You just are capable of doing so. And then also Youngtown. You can see where it is on the map. So that's the only reason you'd have any way of knowing like
Yeah.
what any of that means.
Well, it makes sense that the people in Snowman would be telling you about all these places if they do travel a lot.
Yeah. But of course, that's something that I only know because of the encyclopedia.
Somebody else said, "Oh my, your nose is running." And they said this to me right after I caught the cold from somebody else. And then I had this moment of panic, and I thought to myself, oh my gosh, am I spreading this virus around to the populace, not knowing it? Like, do I need to stop right now, get some mouthwash, take care of this before I talk to anybody else? Or, you know, I don't want to be a super spreader.
The game is it's getting you a bit because like if you doubt what it will or won't do, it'll surprise you. But no, nothing that advanced is happening here.
I know. I figured. I was like, the responsible thing for me to do is to go heal myself. But I didn't do the responsible thing. I just went around and talked to everybody because I didn't want to buy a bunch of mouthwash.
And that's a reasonable thing to do. And also that girl says that to you regardless of whether you have a cold or not.
Does she give you the cold if you don't have it
She does
already?
not.
Okay, well, then I guess your nose, could be running from the cold weather or something.
Weirdly, it's only people in blue who give you the cold.
Oh, that's a good tip. I'll have to remember that. Is that just for Snowman or is that everywhere?
I think it's everywhere. I'm not sure. I mean,
Okay.
it's not a guarantee either, but if it's a town that has a pandemic going on, don't
Watch
talk
out
to
for the people in blue. All right. And then somebody else said, you kids are crazy running around with just T-shirts on. And I'm like, dude, I hear you. I see kids running around in T-shirts in 30-degree weather, and I'm like, what are you doing? Stop that. Put something on. You're going to catch cold.
And then that guy gives you the cold because he coughs all over you.
God, of course.
Another thing folks talk about is Anna because you're looking for her. And they keep mentioning that she is in a chateau.
Not a mansion.
Yeah, Anna's house is a chateau, not in a mansion. But I bet you already knew that. That is actually completely untrue because this is a major point of localization in the game. Anna lives in a church.
Which is very apparent as soon as you walk into it, but there was nothing in the game to confirm that for me. So I was thinking to myself, do they live in a church that was converted into a chateau, or is this supposed to literally be a church?
Late 80s, early 90s, Nintendo censoring of all references to anything resembling religion, but mostly Christianity.
And why the distinction? Why say it's a chateau, not a mansion?
I don't know what the original line is. Maybe it's some distinction of that was originally a distinction between the kind of church it was or something. So they're like, well, since now it's not a church, then we're going to have to make another distinction.
But as soon as you walk into it, you see stained glass windows are all around. It's very clear what it is. And I don't think there's any musical cues that would indicate that it's a church, but it's definitely what I thought of when I first walked in there. And as soon as you do walk in, you see Anna standing right there. And you go up and talk to her, and she says, I must go on a trip to find my mom, and I needed your help. So I've been waiting for you, Ninten. First, let's go see what's happening in Youngtown.
It's kind of vague what happened in Youngtown, but the encyclopedia says ever since her mother was kidnapped in a faraway town, she's been a pillar to her father, who's completely lost his spirit. So she's the daughter of the clergyman. It's how it's worded in the encyclopedia. And I don't know if what work brought her mom and like someone else's mom to Youngtown, but that's the implication.
So Anna's father is the pastor of Snowman, and they all live in the church. And because people are traveling all the time, I guess the idea is that Anna's mother traveled at some point to Youngtown and is missing along with everyone else that used to live there. And so
Right.
Anna is wanting to go and look for her and find her, but she's been waiting for Ninten and Lloyd to show up so that she can accompany them on their journey and they can sort of help each other.
Yeah, she says, "You've appeared just like in my dream. The boy in my dream looks just like you." Now, there's a little bit of dialogue that's in there that I do love. It's not my Mother She quote, but she asks, "Are you Ninten?" If you say no, she says, "Don't get silly on me now." Which I like so much, I shoved it in the intro.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I don't think I got that part because I don't mess around when it comes to main character dialogues. I don't want to screw anything up. So I make sure to answer honestly. And I knew she was psychic, so I was like, I'm not fooling this girl, so.
I like to think that my Ninten was just nervous. Like, no, I don't know. You're pretty. Stop it.
But after she greets you, you walk over and you talk to Anna's father. And she says, "Next time, Mommy will come back with me. Believe in us." And he says, "I know success will be yours in the end. Surely our pleas will be heard in the near future." So he seems to be on board with all this.
If you talk to him before you talk to Anna, he does have a different piece of dialogue. He says, "My daughter Anna has never been a brave girl, but she has a kind heart and has a secret strength."
This all happens, of course, after you return Anna's hat to her, which you had picked up in the reindeer train station.
Yeah, and in fact, you don't actually ever have to get Anna. You don't
What?
have to get Anna. You don't have to get Anna to proceed.
Really?
Yeah, you don't have to do this at all, because when the game opens up, it opens up.
So you can complete the game without Anna?
Yeah, I don't believe, unless you glitch or something, that you can fire off the rockets at Duncan's. But I mean, if your Ninten is strong enough, you can walk through the train tunnel, and just keep walking and keep walking and keep walking, and walk all the way to Snowman and get Anna before you get Lloyd if you wanted to.
Ninten solos the world. That's an interesting idea.
It's a thing you can do. Whether you should do it.
But you wouldn't want to leave her behind because Anna has a wide variety of fantastic psi powers.
Yeah, she's very physically weak when it comes to dealing out physical blows and so forth, but in this game, Ninten has no offensive psychokinetic abilities. He only has status abilities. And Anna is the only party member that has offensive psychokinetic abilities.
She can kick some butt.
Yeah. There's another character on the way, but the team has come together. You went very quickly from being like a solo person to like a full posse.
And the game responds. It starts throwing larger groups of enemies at you, too.
And then you have to make decisions about like, well, there's the psychokinetic abilities that deal damage to one enemy, or there's the psychokinetic abilities that deal damage to all enemies, and like how that damage disperses and so forth. So there's a bit of strategy involved.
Which is pretty typical for RPGs, so I don't think we need to get into all that, but it's fairly standard offensive spell casting.
Mm-hmm. Now, we mentioned the frying pan at the general store or the Jack store. That's because the standard battle implement in EarthBound and EarthBound Beginnings for female characters is, I'd say, offensively, a frying pan.
Yeah. It's always a frying pan, though. It's always a frying pan in so many games.
If you're a girl in a video game during this era, you wear pink, you use ribbons as defensive items, and you hit things with frying pans. Because, women are from the kitchen.
Yeah.
And I hate it. I hate it a lot. I've always hated it. But the good news is, in this game, we have items like the boomerang and the slingshot that anybody can use. So you don't need to give Anna a frying pan ever. You can just give her a boomerang or something similar to it.
You don't have to give her any weapon. Just let her rain down spells of death on everything.
It's good to be able to hit something with your fists in a pinch if you run out of psi power.
Fair enough.
Let's learn some more about Anna. She's age 12, just like Ninten, and she's the only character who we know the birthday of. She was born December 23rd. Children younger than her call her Little Mother because at Sunday school she teaches songs and reads to them from one of her favorite books, The Little Prince, which I hear great things about. I've never read it.
It's interesting that it appears in this game because, like, one of the opening themes of the book is how grown-ups have an inability to perceive important things that children are able to perceive.
Oh, yeah, that is pretty on the nose for this entire series. Anna's also known for her skilled piano playing, which she does to relieve stress and give her clarity. She understands the language of music as well as she understands written or spoken word. As the encyclopedia specifically says, to Anna, a piano melody is simply words of another kind.
I relate to that majorly.
Says the person who's scoring the show. Yes, I would imagine you do. She loves to write letters to her friends and has both a stamp and envelope collection. And she has a Japanese pen pal named Yoshi who sent her what's become one of her favorite records, I'm Home, the 1981 record by Akiko Yano. As the encyclopedia says, she may not understand a foreign country's language, but has the mysterious ability to comprehend what a piano is trying to say. And Yano's later song, Greenfields, is quoted in the encyclopedia in part of the section about the underflow. I listened to these records, and I'd never heard of Yano before, and she is amazing and kind of sounds like, what if Kate Bush was Japanese and sung in a bunch of different genres?
Oh, that sounds awesome.
If you want to hear what it sounds like for Kate Bush to sing yacht rock style music in Japanese, I've heard that now. It's wild.
Kate Bush yacht rock. Let's go.
In Japanese.
In Japanese.
Also, there's a story about Anna and some frogs. Once she was feeling really disturbed by an upcoming frog dissection in class because she was worried about the frogs. The day of the dissection, she felt unwell enough that she stayed home from school, and while in bed, she broke out in a fever. The next day, she heard about what people were calling the Great Frog Escape, and for reasons that are not elaborated on, she realized that her powers were somehow responsible, like during her fever. Powers that, according to the encyclopedia, she liked to get by without using, if possible. On the way home from school, a frog said to her, I owe you one, dear Anna, and she replied telepathically, next time you get caught, it's none of my concern.
Oh, wow.
Now, this frog scene is very suspiciously similar to a scene from E.T., further cementing that Spielberg connection between Mother, especially this first game, and the oeuvre of Spielberg at this time. E.T. seems to have been a pretty significant influence on the game, and there's a scene where E.T. gets drunk and psychically projects onto Elliot, influencing what he's doing at school, all the way to a famous scene where some frogs are being euthanized for dissection, and Elliot goes on a rampage and starts freeing all of them, and all the other kids join in. It sounds like Anna does the same thing somehow, but it's just her asleep doing it.
She seems aware of these powers in a way that Ninten wasn't. She hears the animals thinking, but she knows full well what it is, and she understands the effect that she's having on the world.
Yeah, which is why, and we should make a point of saying this, there's a lot of things in this particular introduction to this episode that is me elaborating on what I've interpreted from the game in the encyclopedia. Like Anna's parents recognizing that she has special powers, but like putting constraints on whether or not she's destructive or not. That's all me. I invented that. That's not in the game. It's not in the encyclopedia. But things like this frog escape and trying to get by without using her powers and so forth, I interpreted it in that way.
You took some creative license using all the sources that you had available, and we'll make sure to call those out when we get to those pieces so that you all know what is actually in the game and what is sort of elaborating on that.
Yeah, it's a little difficult with the main characters and getting into their heads when there are kind of holes in their stories. But I'd like to hope that I still have, rendered all of them in a style that is true to the source material, even if it's kind of off the rails from what is provided.
Well, let's get back on the rails and let's head over to Spookane.
Now, of course, Anna just said, let's go to Youngtown, but there's this town in the middle, and you could have gone to Spookane at any point. It just makes sense to not do it until you have another party member, because, gosh, I wouldn't want to be here with any fewer party members.
Yeah, and as I was traveling around on the Paradise Line, going back and visiting places, I actually heard more of that song. I was traveling from Marysville back to Snowman, which is a pretty long train trip, so I heard a good chunk of the song. And so my memorable melody from the game is, again, the Paradise Line, because I heard more of it. And, It may be used music, but it's new to me.
Well, yeah. Hey, look, the Paradise line is so good. Why not come back for seconds?
It might be my favorite track of the whole game. We'll have
whole
to
game.
see. But yeah,
Whoa.
it's so good. I love it so much.
Okay. Well, on the theme of traveling, before we get to Spookane, we've talked about all the different folks from different places saying different things. My Mothership quote is a weird one. My Mothership quote comes from a person we've already talked to, a man outside the station at Reindeer, one of the people who gave you a clue that the hat belongs to Anna and she lives in Snowman. But when you talk to him again, once that information becomes superfluous, he says, "Go ahead, poke your nose into other people's business. It's what makes playing the game so much fun."
I didn't encounter that because I didn't talk to that guy again. But I love that so much. I love how self-aware this game is. And I love that statement in particular because it's encouraging you to just stick your nose in everybody's business.
It's one of those fourth wall breaking moments that happens throughout this series that's really special. It's like it's acknowledging different layers of reality. It's saying, hey, you, the player of this game, you might not get to go up to any random person in your life and hear something fascinating that they've got to tell you. But this lets you do that, so just live it up.
Once you get to Spookane, you're dropped off at the train station. You walk into town, and it seems to be abandoned. It seems like all the buildings are run down.
Yeah.
I didn't see anyone around, and there was enemies attacking me the whole way. So for a while, I was just wandering around thinking, okay, well, I guess nobody is here also. But it turns out there is someone in the larger Spookane, because there is kind of like a little smaller side community off a little bit of ways.
Yeah.
But if you go into the hotel, there is someone who is standing behind the counter that looks like a robotic Ninten.
Oh, that's interesting.
And when you talk to him, he says something about like, you want to stay the night.
It's for the most part the same dialogue that anybody at a hotel would say to you, except there's like some like weird laughter.
Right. And after you sleep, the person behind the counter attacks you, and it's a Starman.
What I think is really interesting about what you just said here is I've never thought, oh, it's like a robotic Ninten. Because, like, what I mean, the graphics are so simplified. It looks like somebody wearing a weird little kind of like gray-green outfit and like maybe has a skull for a face.
I thought it looked like he was wearing a ball cap, so...
I mean, it kind of does, yeah. But like, there's also a skull. But making the correlation of like it's like an evil Ninten robot, like I've never thought about that.
That's just what I thought when I first saw it. I might be making that up completely.
Well, it's a really interesting idea and something. I mean, I don't really know. I don't have much information about that. There is a living human being in Spookane town, and that is a doctor working at the hospital. He's the only one left.
Okay, I didn't go into the hospital, so I didn't see that person.
There's no nurse, so you can't recover people's bodies, but the doctor can do doctor stuff. And the encyclopedia, it says, even in the old district, as cut off as it is from human activity, there's still lights on at the hotel and the hospital. If you're about to hit the floor from exhaustion, you have the option of enduring the hotel manager and the ugly look in his eyes and staying the night. Even the lone, flustered doctor whose nurse flew the coop will at least heal your injuries.
Well, glad to know they still have some basic services, and, hats off to that doctor for sticking around and taking care of anybody who might be wandering through. Now, I will say I went up to the second floor, and I went to look for a third floor of the hotel to see if there was an interesting restaurant at the top of that, and I was fairly disappointed that there was not a restaurant haunt up at the top.
Oh, Jess. No. That's too good. Spookane is not called Spookane in Japan. It's called Halloween.
Halloween.
Yeah. Its major industries were mining and commerce. Roughly 100 years ago, a vein of gold was discovered in the nearby mountains. Here in the barren wasteland where the very rock face is harsh, a gold mining town appeared, flooded with men dreaming of striking it rich. Singing the praises of the gold they'd obtained, the townsfolk would let loose and whoop it up like crazy every night. It's said that the state of things were that practically every night was Halloween, and that's where the town got its name. Even now, copper and tin, in addition to gold, have been dug up.
I was going to say, because those buildings are pretty large. It seems like Spookane was a large town.
A lot of the apartment complexes you see, the ones north of the train station specifically, are for housing miners who are still doing that job somewhere out there in the wilds. I mean, they would have been if this hadn't happened. And what happened is that a bunch of kids fainted due to a, quote, unknown force. And then Everybody took refuge in the mountains to the east, and this old district has become a literal ghost town, overrun by a, quote, unseen madness, which mostly means the regular kind of woodland enemies, bears, and then saucers and stuff.
Typical world enemies you've been fighting up until this point.
I did finally catch a red snake, though, which is something that had been happening. Every now and then, there's a snake that shows up that's not the usual blue snake that you've been fighting since the beginning of the game. It's a red snake, and it usually runs away immediately. But I finally got him.
I did encounter one of those as well, and yeah, it bites you and then runs away.
When you beat it, you get a lot of experience points. You get much more in the Japanese version, but it's still, if you can catch one, it's a worthwhile way to spend your time. Yeah. Follow the steep mountain path that lies east of the old district until it goes up to the residential area where the people of Halloween have taken refuge. By improving mountain cottages, making use of the old elementary schoolhouse, and recycling old vacation homes, the people are devising different ways of making a living.
There's some really interesting folks, just like everywhere else in this game, but my mother, she quote, came from this area. I was walking along and I saw a woman standing there and I went up and talked to her, and she said to me, "I'm not a resident of this town. I'm your assistant. Maybe you forgot to write something down. I'll sell you a hint for only $1,000. And I was like, "No, I'm good. I don't need any help."
You weren't like, "I'm just going to go find a cash machine, Bunny Lebowski"?
Yeah. And so she said, "Oh, you don't need anyone's help, do you? Fine and dandy. You can color me gone." And then she just disappeared into thin air.
She vanishes. Yeah.
Yeah. What's up with that?
Well, she was telling the truth in a weird way. This is another person who's breaking the fourth wall. Their presence there is very specifically like, "Hey, look, this game's pretty confusing. You can go anywhere. I'll sell you hints for $1,000. You could write all kinds of stories about who this person is, where they come from, how they operate, but it's definitely somebody who does not exist in reality as the rest of the characters in this game know it. If you say no, she is gone forever. Like, this person will never come back.
So your only option is to spend $1,000 or lose the opportunity forever.
Yeah, I mean, of course, if you don't have $1,000, she's like, "Cool, come back when you have $1,000. I mean, that's not what she says, but something like that, you know?
Yeah. What does she tell you if you spend the money?
She tells you that she can only sell you 3 hints, and then proceeds to tell you the first of the 3 ones, at least at this point in the game. I'm not really sure how the mechanics of it work. I assume it adjusts based on what you have or haven't done, but she said to me, "The ghost house is not a place for slaying monsters. There is a melody, hee, a haunting melody, hee."
Which I guess that is kind of leading you towards exploring it and finding the melody that's inside of it. I mean, I guess if you didn't know that already, then...
Yeah, I mean, Rosemary's Manor, which we're about to get to, it is a challenging and labyrinthine place, and you don't have to go there until you get to the part of the game where you need all those melodies. Otherwise, you can't beat the game.
I was wondering about that because those enemies in there were tough.
Yeah. You could go in there anytime, and you got to do it at some point, but you don't have to do it now.
Yeah. So, being that it's called the Rosemary's Manor, is that a reference to Rosemary's Baby?
The answer is probably, because Rosemary's Baby, an international hit from 1968, adapted and directed by Roman Polanski. It's a big deal in the horror world, but what does it have to do with this game? Nothing other than, they're like, here's a horror part of the game. Let's pick an interesting name. And they picked Rosemary. And that's the case in Japanese and English. It's Rosemary both ways. But the game doesn't have any other actual contextual reference to Rosemary's Baby. The only thing is that Rosemary's a mother. And this is a game called Mother. And maybe that's all we got.
Well, it's the first thing I thought of when they said that. So, like you told me earlier, if it seems like it's a reference to something, it probably is.
Yes. I think that's true in this case.
Okay.
It just doesn't really mean much.
But you can't get into the house without a key. And when you find that person that will give you that key, they say, "Oh, you're such a charming boy. Just looking at you makes me so confident. I'm sure you'll bring that house into control. Here's the key to it."
Yep.
Who's that gives you the key?
That is Mr. Rosemary's daughter, who is an adult woman, because she has a child, as you'll learn later. She has a baby, but the baby's a child that can talk. The Rosemarys are clearly not well liked by most anybody else in the community. They're, I guess, kind of wealthy eccentrics Someone outright says, I don't like the little Rosemary girl, but who she's talking about is this woman who's a grown woman.
Yeah, that was a little confusing because when you talk to people, it doesn't give you any like nameplate or anything like that. You're just supposed to guess from the context of the dialogue who this person actually is. And in the case when you're talking to the Rosemarys, you kind of get the impression, okay, they are probably the Rosemarys that lived in the house. That's why they have the key and they're giving it to you and they know that it's haunted and all that stuff. But there's nothing that outright calls that out to you.
No, and there's a bunch of context about what the Rosemary Manor is that is not given you in the game and is only given to you in the encyclopedia. Because around this little area that everybody's refuged in, you've heard things about a ghost house elsewhere in the world. You hear about a piano that plays itself. So if you're thinking about the melodies, you might think, oh, I definitely should check that out. And then you also hear some stuff about the Rosemarys as like people to be aware of. What we learn about the Rosemarys from the encyclopedia is that during the gold rush, they struck a high-quality vein, and since then, they've been important figures in the town. The Rosemary that struck it rich was the first mayor, and all the Rosemarys were mayor until the current Mr. Rosemary's father's generation. The firstborn of Mr. Rosemary's mother was his sister, who was, they say, so deformed at birth that she didn't appear human. Mr. Rosemary's father built a villa in the mountain recesses where she would go unnoticed, and so that she would never set foot outside the house, he built a labyrinthine basement keeping her away even from family and apparently shutting her up underground her entire life.
Oh, wow.
They say her only enjoyment came from playing the grand piano there in the backmost room.
Oh my gosh.
Ever since that ominous day last year, possibly because of the child's curse, Mr. Rosemary's villa became a haunted mansion that lets no human being near it. From the very back of the intricately warped basement comes the sound of a piano. It goes without saying that this unhappy incident is the doing of some yet unknown enemy.
Wow. No wonder that place is haunted.
Yeah, it's pretty gnarly.
There is a postman, a jolly postman, who likes to sing. It says la 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 la. And he says, have you heard the Rosemary's new address? And there's somebody else that says, tell the postman that seeks the forwarding address that the Rosemarys have moved far away. La la la. It's a little girl that says that. So I was trying to figure out what in the world are they trying to say here? The Rosemarys have moved far away. They have a forwarding address. Like,
this section has a lot of sloppy translation. There's even an outright typo. They use the wrong there at one point. The translation of EarthBound Beginnings, as it was originally done by Nintendo of America, is not the best. And at places, it gets increasingly rough around the edges, and whatever the heck's happening with the postman or what they're trying to say about the Rosemarys, it's just not.
it just doesn't land.
Yeah.
There's also another person that says, I'm the only clown in Spookane. Everyone else is so serious. And actually, it's kind of like they're asking you a question, like you can say yes or no to that. And if you say yes, he says, truth is, by nature, I'm not a jolly guy. And if you say no, he says, is that right? I may be the true pessimist myself. It's another one of those things that there was something interesting there, but I just couldn't piece it together based off of what was being said.
Yeah. Now, there has been some fan translation work, which in theory we're going to talk about at some point, but as we're playing the game as it's available on the Nintendo Switch currently, this is what we're talking about. And we can talk about that other stuff later. Experience that I haven't had and Jess hasn't had is playing the game with a better translation, which does exist.
Okay. Another quote that did make sense that I found very delightful was the little boy says, a ghost appeared at my house too, but he didn't stay long. He thought my room was too small. Like, this ghost is like too picky. It's like, sorry, kid, your room's too small. I can't stay here.
Yeah, that's little vignettes like that are one of the great pleasures of these games.
So you go up to the mansion, you use the key to get inside, and the mansion sucks. It's all dark. It's just a labyrinth of passageways. Typically, you walk into a room and there's two doors that exit on the other side of it. And you go through this just chain of choosing left and right paths. Occasionally, there is a staircase that goes down. Sometimes the staircase is really long. Other times it's kind of short. But the entire house is filled with really difficult monsters. I died many times there.
It's a bit of a slog, but I enjoy it so much more than either of the factories. for starters, it's easier to figure out where you are in some regards, like because it's just different forking paths and so forth. And it's also punctuated by a strange phenomenon that I'm not really sure what to attribute to, but when you enter Rosemary's Manor, you talk to a mouse, and the mouse says, "I'm just an ordinary mouse." The room with the piano. The he is important because it may suggest that the mouse is the one who then proceeds to torment you throughout this entire ordeal. Because every now and then you'll enter a room and something will happen. Like in one, you just walk through a place that goes, "Ah!" Like you don't hear it, but you see it, "arg" spelled out. And then one says, "Nobody's here." Or "You'll never make it."
Turn back now.
Yeah. So what's interesting about these things these are other ways, because they happen every time you get to certain points, that you can tell where you are if you get lost. You're like, "Oh, I'm in the part that says nobody's here."
Interesting. That's really interesting. I did not pick up on that. That's really clever.
The enemies, some of them are pushovers, and some of them are the worst.
There is an enemy that's called Armor that frequently comes in pairs, hits really hard, has a ton of health and defense, and they don't really seem to be weak to a whole lot. I think they were weak to one of the elements, but usually Anna did not survive long because they would just hit for so much.
And they use PK Thunder, which is not fun. There's a bunch of different things you can do. Like I was having Ninten use defense up like immediately to protect the party from certain doom, and just doing status stuff to make sure that my party could stay alive long enough to fight them, to get the experience from them. So maybe, just maybe, I could start getting better at fighting them, but it was tough. And I don't know if this is just a misnomer or what. They're listed under the robots section in the enemy list. So I suppose there's sort of like you could think, oh, is this armor that's definitely appropriate in an old haunted mansion actually an alien robot? But I don't think that's the case. I think it's a haunted armor. I think that's what's going on here.
Yeah, it's made of metal. That's the only thing that would make it seem robot-like.
There is an enemy in there that does seem to indicate alien tampering, which is the bionic bat. Just like the bionic scorpion, aliens have engineered a bat that is bionic. However, as the encyclopedia says, if there's one aspect of Mr. Bat they apparently weren't able to change, it was, of course, his personality. So the side of him that puts himself in other shoes remains in place, as in the way that Mr. Batty can get confused. However, these bionic bats, they attack with what is called in the English translation stone origin, which turns a person to stone and is something that can be cured by healing gamma, but it's actually stone needle in Japanese.
So like it sticks you with a weapon or something that
and it
turns
petrifies you. Yeah.
There's also the alarm ghost, which is the same sprite as the normal ghost that we've encountered before, but is kind of more translucent and actually looks pretty cool. I liked that enemy.
Yeah.
Except for the fact that it calls other enemies to fight against you, including dust balls, which explode upon death. They don't hit you for any damage while you're fighting them normally, but as soon as you kill them, they explode and do a lot of fire damage.
They're weird. They just look like a big kind of scribble with a face. I wasn't sure what to make of them. Like, is it literally a dust ball? Like the fireball, like maybe it was literally a fireball back in Duncan's factory. But the way it's described is a ghost born from within garbage.
Oh, all the garbage that you live lying around, and it gets possessed and attacks you and blows
Turns
up.
into a psychokinetic tumbleweed, basically.
That's a good way to describe it. That's exactly what it looks like.
It can hit you in battle, but it almost always just grins and bears it.
I fought several of them, and I don't think it ever actually attacked me. It always just grinned and bared it and then blew up.
Yeah, I don't think it attacked me either, but it can.
There's also my smashable enemy of this section of the game, which is Shroudly, who is a green man in a brown cloak, and he unfortunately uses an ability called Last Blow, which just one-shots you, which I hate, but there was something about Shroudly that I really found appealing.
Shroudly is also my most smashable enemy. Shroudly's design is rad. The design is so cartoony and strange, it almost feels like it's outside of the EarthBound aesthetic and a little bit more into like the aesthetic of something that would like early 90s gross out toys that would come later, like Mad Balls or something like that. And originally the sprite was even cooler because he had blood dripping from his hands.
Oh, wow.
Because Shroudly's actual name is Blood-Soaked Zombie.
Blood-Soaked Zombie?
In order to make up for blood loss, he lives by sucking it from humans. People who've had their blood sucked see a sharp decrease in their offense and defense.
That's horrifying.
Interesting thing about the last blow, though, it deals an absurd amount of damage, but then the battle text says Shroudley was exhausted and the battle ends.
Oh, no.
So that last blow just kind of like it ends the whole match.
What a jerk. Just shows up, one-shots one member of your party, and then goes away.
Yeah. Something else of note here is that there are enemies that only show up when summoned by the Alarm Ghost. The Alarm Ghost can summon all kinds of stuff. Dust balls, bionic bats, but also zombies. Not pseudo-zombies, regular zombies. Which are worse because they use a brain shock technique. They also laugh at you sometimes, which is another different thing they do. And then the other thing is the nasty zombie, which is the palette swap of the gang zombie, and it's harder.
Lots of stuff inside that haunted house that will ruin your day.
Yeah. It keeps you on your toes. Ninten, at this point in the game, is probably your fastest character, and he has status attack stuff, so you have to, like, make sure that Ninten does something to protect your other characters who are weaker. And then Anna is last in speed up into a certain point, so most enemies are going to get an attack before she actually manages to get her psychokinetic ability off. So you have to really pay attention to this, like, flow in the battle. This is the first time in the game where I've really... Like, now that you're playing with a set of 3 people, that you actually do need to pay attention to battle strategy way more than usual.
Yeah, which I like. I think that is great. I love in RPGs when the fights get a little bit more complicated than just hitting the attack button over and over and over again. This haunted house is annoying in other ways, too, though. There are gifts that don't contain anything. You open them up and they're just empty. There are looping passageways, at least I think they are, and it seemed like I was kind of like, I would go in one side, go out the other, go in and out, and it just kind of like, it took you back and forth around like the same loop over and over again.
That does happen, yeah.
So it's really just this weird sort of death tunnel.
Yeah, it is definitely a death tunnel.
But after you make your way to the bottom of the house, you find a room with a piano in it. And if you go up and you look at the piano, it plays a melody that you remember.
And that is a very passive reference to a very famous Japanese movie, the 1977 film House. It's directed by Nobuhiko Obayashi, and this movie is incredible. This movie is essential viewing for any fan of EarthBound for a lot of reasons. Obayashi, just like Shigesato Itoi, is somebody who was famous for kind of like a weird thing before he stepped into creating this movie. He was a famous commercial director, and this was his first feature film that he directed. It came into being because it was a commission from the studio. They're like, we want Jaws. Give us a Japanese Jaws. And so he's like, all right, I'll figure that out. And created what is easily one of the most visually and just in every other regard, unique films I've ever seen in my life.
Totally. You showed it to me a while ago, and they do things visually in that movie that I have never seen before, that I could really only even dream of. It's completely disarming at times. I'm curious to hear what it kind of has to do with EarthBound. Obviously, there's the piano, and in the movie, there's a piano that eats people. But other than that, what else is relevant about House as it appears in EarthBound?
Well, if you think about the kind of project it is, what we've just delivered so far is an oversimplification of how it got made. And Obayashi had to overcome a lot of different struggles, especially regarding how he was perceived by other film professionals in terms of what genre-breaking and even like production-breaking way that he wanted to make this movie. It was extraordinarily against the grain from top to bottom. There's a Criterion release that has a bunch of wonderful documentary content on it that I highly recommend. It is as radical a movie as the Mother series are games, and it's a cultural touchstone to a degree that Shigesato Itoi, there was a kinship there. He felt emboldened by in a lot of ways. Having a piano that plays itself it's a kind of standard fare for a haunted house thing, but Obayashi got a lot of the ideas for all the spooky stuff in this film, which is a haunted house movie, and this is a haunted house that we're in here, from talking to his daughter, and she would tell him her nightmares, and he would turn them into the parts of the movie. Then also the theme to House is a one-finger piano melody, which is exactly the sort of thing that Shigesato Itoi asked for when it came to the 8 melodies. Something that was beautiful but simple that a child could play with one finger if they needed to. Now, of course, the piano, like all the other melodies, you just hear it and it's over. In the audio drama segment, I did choose to combine Anna's piano playing and the history that we learned from the Mother Encyclopedia about the horrible things that happened in Rosemary's Manor and actually create a beautiful little scene there. But that's not something that happens in the game at all. That's another thing we've added.
It was a creation, but it was a good one. That was a heart-touching story, and I really enjoyed it.
When I'm writing these, I do want to replicate the actual experience as much as possible, but sometimes the adaptation commands something a bit more.
Well, fortunately, the piano in this haunted house is a little bit friendlier and teaches you one of the melodies that you need to collect.
Yeah. And once you leave the manor, you're done, you're good. And the ghosts are still there. But if you go back and you talk to the Rosemary lady again, she says, oh, the ghosts aren't gone, but what a brave boy you are. I've renamed my son Ninten after you.
Oh, renamed.
He renamed her son. She had a son, and you can talk to her son. Her son's just walking around. And he says, hi there, my name is Ninten. I used to be Buggerer Rosemary. You heard me right. I said Buggerer, not Buggerer. Buggerror. And as this is an all-ages podcast, I'm not going to explain what that word means. Don't look it up. It's not for you to know if you don't know already. But it's not something you would expect in a game that's been censored so intensely as this game. However, Kinisu did come up with a very interesting theory, all because of The Legend of Zelda 2. In Legend of Zelda 2, there is a mysterious but correctly translated line of dialogue that reads, I am error. And there's also a character named Bagu. Well, Bagu is likely a misinterpretation of the Japanese word for bug. There's a reasonable suggestion that these are intentional technical jokes. Bug and error. So if this was happening in a similar timeline in a Nintendo game, because the actual content that's been translated, Buggerror, is correct. That's what that character says, and they translated it directly. It may be that it's a joke about, like, this NPC had its name changed to Ninten and is now glitching out, bug error, and that's what's happening here. It's a joke about glitching.
Maybe it's a direct homage to Zelda 2.
Or, as Kinisu pointed out, Shigeru Miyamoto worked on both games.
Well, I wonder if anything bad happens if you say his name 3 times in a row. Buggeroo. No, you know what? I'm not going to chance it. I don't want to do that.
Good job bringing it back, Jess. Well done. We've got more adventuring to come, but for now, I'm Kat.
I'm Jess.
And that's all she wrote. Mother She Wrote is made possible thanks to the generous support of our Patreon producers, Becky Scott Fairley, Bob Hogan, CB, David Devereaux, Joe Tank Ricciardelli, Josh King, McDribble Deluxe, Mjolnir MK86, Patrick Webster, Sean Hutchinson, Sean T. Red, and our super deluxe executive Patreon producers, Big Bad Shadow Man, Marcus Larson, and Jamieson Malone.
You can join the team at patreon.com/Omniverse Media. And if you think that Mother She Wrote is simply smashing, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or Podchaser. And be sure to subscribe via your favorite podcast player.
This series is recorded and produced in Orlando, Florida, and Louisville, Kentucky, on lands stolen from their indigenous people, the Timucua and Seminole, and Shawnee, Cherokee, Osage, Seneca Iroquois, Miami, Hopewell, and Adena.
Acknowledgement of the first peoples of these lands and the lasting repercussions of colonization is just the beginning of the restorative work that is necessary. Through awareness, we can prompt allyship, action, and ultimately decolonization.
For links to aid Indigenous efforts and to learn more about the First Nations of the land where you live, visit omniverse.media/landback.
Mother She Wrote is written, produced, and performed by me, Jessica Mudd.
And me, Kat Plackard. Our original score is composed and performed by Jess, and Anna is performed by Sarah Rhea Werner.
Special thanks to Kinisu for his invaluable work translating the Mother Encyclopedia. Find a link to his translation, other media we referenced, and full episode transcripts at mothershewrote.earth.
Mother She Wrote is not affiliated with Nintendo, Shigesato Itoi, or any rights holders of the Mother and EarthBound intellectual properties. Please play the game's official Nintendo releases.